18 months, I'm going to be sitting across the table from Xi Jinping, and so representing this country, and so I can handle the tough ones. You all have a decision to make in about, 13 days or so? So give me the hard ones on your mind, and I'll tell you who we are and why we're in this. Apurva, I think, has already begun, and we're looking forward to a conversation. Please.
So on meritocracy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes. Specifically related to inheritance tax.
Sure.
Are you pro-inheritance tax to the point that we would be giving up a lot of money doing?
As a matter of policy, no.
No?
No. I favor a 12% flat tax, ordinary income, capital gain, corporate, across the board. Flatten the tax code. Eliminate the cronyist deductions. I think that's a big part of where we can recover a lot of this. And there's about $750 billion in tax compliance costs. Think about that every year. That's just the out-of-pocket tax compliance costs. If your tax code could be simpler than, this caucus card, which I'd love for many of you to fill out, by the way. But, this would actually be just 12%, straight across the board. Basically no deductions across the board. There's product of special interest lobbying. Deduct your costs, that's it. No other special deductions or favoritism. That's how I would do this. Now, in my second book, Nation of Victims, I did actually lay out what I view as a thought experiment, right? It's interesting because I went to school at places like Harvard and Yale. I didn't grow up in wealth or in elite circles. My parents came to this country with no money in search of opportunity. And in a single generation, I've gone on to found multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. I did it while marrying Apurva, who perhaps you got a chance to get to know. She's going to be a badass first lady, and she's a surgeon, and she's kept her full-time job throughout this entire process, saving lives. But we're in this to save the life of our country. But what I learned is, anyway, when we met, she was in med school at Yale. I was in law school. I went to Harvard for college. These are environments we never imagined when we were growing up in Southwest Ohio, when my dad's facing layoffs at the GE plant in Evendale, Ohio. And it hit me, I would say in my early 20s, that I actually had the ultimate privilege, actually. I went to school with kids who were billionaires or kids of billionaires in the Upper East Side of Manhattan or anywhere else. And we almost had, I wouldn't have wished for it any differently, two parents in the house with the focus on education, instilling in us a belief in God, but something to aspire to, not some wealth being passed down to us that we had as our security blanket. At the same time, people who I went to school with, people I've been roommates with otherwise, have suffered from mental health issues, depression, anxiety, etc., over having that sense of being lost in your parents' shadow, inheriting $1 billion but not knowing what you want to actually achieve with your own life. And so I think part of what's missing in this country and where I land is we need the restoration of purpose and meaning. And young people especially, how old are you if you don't mind me asking? 27. People in our generation, I'm a generation ahead of you, and younger, I think right now are starved for purpose and meaning. And we turn to whatever might fill that vacuum. Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, climate ideology, COVIDism became an ideology of itself. Depression, anxiety, fentanyl, suicide, chasing green pieces of paper as an end in itself, inheriting green pieces of paper, not knowing what to do with about it. For me, all of these are symptoms of a deeper void of purpose, and that's part of what I was diagnosing through, I think, a thought exercise in that book. And I'll use that as a chance to say a word about my own style as a leader of this country. Thomas Jefferson is probably my favorite president. He was 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, and he was a true intellectual. He was somebody who could explore ideas that he disagreed with, maybe even offer a better statement of them than the people who were advocating for them, but that's why he knew what he believed, even with even greater conviction. And I think that's the kind of leader that we need right now in this country. We live in a 1776 moment. We live in a moment where the very ideals this country was founded on, that's what's on the table. Not a tax rate being a little bit higher or lower. That's not what's on the table right now. Those are details compared to the basic rules of the road. Do you believe in free speech? Do you believe that you get to speak your mind openly as long as I get to in return? Do you believe that you get to worship freely as you wish without the government getting in your way or telling you that you're a hate group because you adopt a traditional view of marriage? Do you believe that we live in a constitutional republic where the people, whether they're in Maine or Colorado for that matter, get to decide who they're actually voting for, rather than people who were never elected deciding who you get to vote for? Do you believe in the rule of law, that a nation should have borders? I say this as the kid of legal immigrants who came to this country through the front door. Your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. These are basic rules of the road. These aren't Democrat or historically, this isn't a Democrat versus Republican set of questions. It's not a black versus white set of questions. These are the basic rules of the road that the country was founded on. That's what I think is at stake in this election. And so this is how we're going to win the general election in a landslide. If you all make me your nominee, I view it as my responsibility back to you to deliver you a landslide election. I believe we can do this in 2024 as Ronald Reagan did in 1980. And here's how I'm going to do it. I was talking to, some left of center podcast people who were with me on the bus on the way here. Oh, he's right here. What did you do for some podcasting, left, leaning podcasting? Yeah. Yeah, whatever it is.
Subscribe.
But, he worked for Obama or something, right? Yeah, well, he was asking me about national unity. And we'll talk to the left, talk to the right, talk to anybody. Here's how we're going to unite this country. It's by embracing the principles that set this country into motion. Those are radical ideals. Those are not moderate ideals. But if we embrace the ideals of the American Revolution, that's what unites us as Americans. And if you share those ideals in common, I don't care if you're black or white or historically a Democrat or a libertarian or anything else, we're on the same team. Corporate tax rates being high or low, we'll debate that, but those are details by comparison right now to what's on the table. These are the basic rules of the road that our country was founded on. And yes, I will stand for those 1776 ideals as Thomas Jefferson did when he signed that Declaration of Independence. Thank you. I appreciate the question. Thoughtful. Thank you, sir. We'll give you the mic.
You're a native of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And you live in Columbus.
Yes, that's right.
So you're well attuned to the fact that industry and manufacturing is no part of the landscape there in Ohio any longer. As a CEO, what do you feel that you as a chief executive could do to bring back, particularly manufacturing to this country, to places like Cincinnati, Columbus, but also Des Moines and maybe even Newton, Iowa?
It's beautiful. Yeah, good. Why not, right? Let's be ambitious. So let's get to the root cause of why many businesses have left the United States. There are regulations and limitations that we apply right here in the U.S. that do not apply in places like China. Much of that takes the form of the climate agenda in the United States, which is shackling the U.S. They make you measure carbon emissions if you have a factory here. Same factory in China, you don't have those same carbon emission measurements. Well, if you're a company, you're doing the math, you could say, hey, I could still make the goods there. It's just the cost of shipping them back over here, but I still don't get hit on my carbon intensity scores in the United States. I'd rather do this in China. So that's an example of a regulatory state that has been fundamentally hostile to doing business here in the United States, period. There's one more deeper issue I'm going to get into in a second, but that's a lot of this. What can the U.S. president do? Well, it turns out the heart of my agenda is shutting down that regulatory state, that fourth branch of government. Today, the people who we elect to run the government, they're not the ones running the government. It's the people working in the three-letter agencies, the managerial bureaucracy. They're the ones pulling the strings to power today. So many of those climate regulations or otherwise, anti-drilling restrictions, anti-fracking restrictions, labor restrictions, those don't come from Congress. They come from three-letter agencies. That's what we call the swamp, the deep state. The good news is I can fix that as your next president without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness, because I will run the executive branch of government. So when I'm in office, you ask me as a CEO, how am I going to do this? Well, I've hired thousands of people as a CEO. I know that if somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means they don't work for you. Right? In some literal sense, it means you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without any authority to actually change it. That's what we have in the current president. I don't even sit here bashing Biden because he's in no real sense of the word the President of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class. I'm not going to be a puppet. Day one, we implement 75% mass firings across the federal bureaucracy. That's how you drain the swamp. 8-year term limits for the bureaucrats who report into me. If I can't work for you as your next president for more than 8 years, neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy instead of civil service protections. Any regulation that was not directly based on a law passed by Congress will rescind it on day one and stop enforcing it. It's unconstitutional. Swear an oath to the Constitution, I will keep it. That's how you drain the swamp. And because I'm sensing a detail-oriented room here, it's just sort of my antenna, just from the kind of questions we're getting. I'll tell you this. West Virginia versus EPA, that was the most important Supreme Court case of our lifetime. It came out last year. It said that certain regulations, it's relevant to your question, passed by the EPA affecting the coal industry and certain other industries, they're unconstitutional because Congress never gave the EPA the authority to pass that. That was 6-3, the Supreme Court last year. If that regulation is unconstitutional, it quite literally means most, and I don't use that term lightly, I mean it in a literal sense, the overwhelming majority of all federal regulations right now are unconstitutional. That's how I'm going to run this country. Day one, rescind all of those. That brings manufacturing back in a heartbeat. That actually brings back economic growth to this country in a heartbeat because now we're not shackling ourselves with the same handcuffs that we're using to let China lap us. That's a big part of what's driven businesses out of not only Ohio and Iowa, but much of the rest of this country as well. We reverse that on my watch. It's also how we end the corruption and revive our constitutional republic with 3 branches of government, not 4. And if there's one thing I get done as your next president, we shut down that 4th branch. We actually drain the swamp this time around. That's what it's going to take to revive this country. And I want to say a word about this, too, because this goes to the choice you have to make. They duped Donald Trump on this one. They duped him. They said, you can't fire all of those employees because they have these things called civil service protections. Well, read the law. Those civil service protections do not protect against mass firings. And yes, mass firings are absolutely what I am bringing to the D.C. bureaucracy. That's what he takes, is a president who not only brings the brawn and the ability to break glass. I bring that, and Trump brought some of that too. But it takes a president who knows and understands the law and the Constitution of this country. So broader than manufacturing, but back to the CEO hat. Here's what I'm doing on day one when we get into office. We're shutting down the FBI to the ATF to the CDC to the U.S. Department of Education. Return that money back to the people of this country. Mass firings, 75% of the federal bureaucrats are out. As commander-in-chief, I'll take our own military and move them from places like Germany, where we got 40,000 of our troops sitting there, when Germany doesn't even spend less than 2% of its GDP on its own defense. No, we'll move our own troops to protect our own border, thank you very much. Southern border and northern border, too. We're going to end birthright citizenship on day one for the kids of illegals who are in this country illegally. If I swear an oath to that Constitution, I'll tell you, the 14th Amendment, what it says is the kids of illegals do not enjoy birthright citizenship. So from the day I take office going forward, that ends in this country. Mass deportations of anybody who's in this country illegally, returned to their country of origin. That, too, is part of what actually stands for the rule of law in this country. I don't need new laws for that. The existing laws of this country already allow for it. How would you do it, they say? And this is where they duped Trump again. There's only 6,000 ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. How could you possibly use them to go after millions? The law already says, it's 287G, a section of the law, that allows local law enforcement to serve the warrants provided to them by ICE. Now you have 1 million local law enforcement to do it. This is all day one right out of the gate. We seal both borders. We've ended the mass migration crisis. Mass deportations underway, ended birthright citizenship, mass reduction in the federal employee headcount, shutting down agencies that have become so corrupt that they shouldn't exist any longer. That's what I will deliver for you as your next president without having to ask anybody for permission other than you all to put me there. That's how you drain the swamp. Trump, he rolled over that log and we saw what crawled out, okay? My job is to bring the pesticide. We're taking this to the next level. And as you make your choice in the next 20, 30 days, I'm asking you, the next, 12, 13 days, I'm asking you to think about doing something different than you might have thought about doing 6 months ago. We'll talk more about that. If you think they're going to let this man anywhere near the White House again, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. Do not fall for the trap that they have laid. They're selling us the rope today that they will use to hang us tomorrow. This man got the fight started. That's why we love him, but it is our job to finish it. Our America First movement is bigger than one man. It doesn't belong to Donald Trump, just as it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you, to us, to the people of this country. It didn't start in 2016. It started in 1776. We're 250 years in. We have 250 years and then some yet to go. But this is our moment to get it right, and I do think it's going to take a CEO, somebody coming in from the outside, and somebody from the next generation with fresh legs to reach and lead the new generation of Americans. And that's why I'm in this race. And so thank you. I appreciate that question. Thank you, sir. We'll go to the back right there.
I was at another rally, and they actually talked about how the national debt is going up about $100,000 a second.
Yep, that's about right.
What can we do to address that?
Let me give you a very practical solution, because I could go on all day about this one, but let me give you the punchline about it. What's this young woman's name? What's your name?
Addie.
Addie, how old are you?
10.
10. Thank you for being here. Did you bring a question that you wrote down for me?
Yeah.
I'm going to let you ask that in a little bit, but let me address this gentleman's question first. Addie has about $200,000 of debt on her shoulders that she didn't sign up for. That's unjust. Now, first of all, I think you deserve a president who's not going to be dead and gone by the time that ever transpires. You deserve to hold your leaders accountable. Here's how we're going to deal with it. I'll give you there's a lot to it, but I'll give you the simple version. Take the oil and gas out from underneath our ground and sell it. And use that to buy down our national debt. That buys down $8 trillion of our national debt. $7 trillion of that national debt came from 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that literally did not advance the American interests. I mean, the Taliban is still in charge 20 years later, for God's sakes. Iraq is a more broken country than when we showed up. Avoid making that same mistake in places like Ukraine. Sending $200 billion of our money so some Ukrainian kleptocrat can buy a bigger house. That ends on my watch. Now we're talking about the 75% mass firing in the federal government. Our national debt's under control. And you notice we've done that without touching Social Security or Medicare. See, half the Republican Party, actually more than half the Republican Party, wants to advance what I call America Last as their platform. Cut Social Security and Medicare, cut some veterans benefits, ship $200 billion more to Ukraine to take us closer to the doorstep of World War III. No, not on my watch. We do it in reverse. End the foreign wars that don't advance our interests, protect our own borders and our own homeland in this country. Fight the national debt in the way that I told you without touching Social Security or Medicare benefits. I mean, let me ask a different question. It's almost as if nobody's talking about this. The people who are collecting Social Security, many of them aren't able to make ends meet because the value of that's been inflated away over the course of the time they actually paid into it. So what if I told you there was a way to increase Social Security benefits without worsening the national debt? I think that's of interest to a lot of Americans. Here's how. 40 years ago, if the amount of money in the Social Security Trust Fund had been allowed to be invested in the same way that your financial advisor would tell you to invest your portfolio, diversified, stocks, bonds, treasuries, etc. Today, the average person who's collecting $1,800 per month in Social Security would be collecting $18,000 per month in Social Security. Think about an $18,000 a month check and what a difference that would make. That's government malpractice of the highest order. It's going to take a CEO in the White House, somebody capable of some basic arithmetic, to stand for what's right. And so this idea that we have to trade off what's doing right for our veterans or our seniors but trade that off with the national debt for the next generation. It's a classic version of what the establishment and the media like to do, divide and conquer, black versus white, man versus woman, now young versus old. It doesn't have to be this way. I think what we need to do is unlock our inner animal spirit of American exceptionalism in this country. Economic growth delivered by bringing actual businesses back to this country rather than other ones. Using basic compounding annual interest in our favor to make sure that the next generation isn't shortchanged in the same way. Use the God-given resources this country has been given, the oil and natural gas, underneath our own ground to ensure our own national security and economic security. And that is the clearest plan that anybody's given you for how to address that national debt without laying a finger on Social Security or Medicare. And that's exactly how we're going to do it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. We'll go right next to you. We'll go right next to you. I think we can go, I was late. We can go a little over with this group. Thank you.
I talk loud. I'll go. It's actually a piggyback on that. So one of my thoughts, and Jordan Peterson actually talks about this, and of the, when you're in hard times, it's difficult in the moment to think in the long game.
Yes.
The future. And so everything that we're discussing for how to curtail where we currently are with the debt, oil and gas are the long game, right? When we're talking about times are tough right now, budgeting is extra hard, right?
Yep.
And so when we take that back, when we dial it back, I want to call it panic, the unsettledness of the population in the moment. How do you combat that when you know there's going to be pushback of folks that are like, I'm already struggling, you want to make the struggle harder, right?
Sure, and I think that's mostly the discussion that, as it's currently been framed, making that struggle harder, where we'll talk about increasing the retirement age or cutting the amount of a Social Security benefit or the rate of inflation ties to Social Security benefits. That's going to be difficult to impossible to do. I mean, if you think we're already culturally divided and then you do it against the backdrop of economic scarcity, that's when things go very bad for this country. I'm keen to make sure we don't get there, and we have a couple of outs left. Actually getting the oil and natural gas out of our ground, that's pretty instantaneous. I mean, we could do this within a year in terms of addressing our national debt in the manner we described, end the war in Ukraine, bring our troops back home, actually get the oil and gas out of our natural gas out of our own ground, and the 75% headcount reduction, I think I can get that done in the first year in office. That's exactly why I've picked the narrow path that we do have. 5 years from now, the interest payments on our national debt will be the largest line item in our own federal budget. If we get there, we're done. That's the ball game. We're in quicksand. That's what gives me my sense of urgency to do this now. I think it is going to take somebody from the outside, somebody who's not bought and paid for. Every politician anymore is dancing to the tune of their biggest donor. In my case, that biggest donor is me. I'm not going to be somebody's circus monkey. I'm not going to be a pawn on a chessboard. That's where a lot of that ends up into the national debt as well, some special lobbying provision. Just by show of hands, how many are familiar with this carbon capture pipeline here in Iowa? A good number of you. I'm the only candidate in this race, the only one, who has had the guts to tell you, shouldn't even be that hard, that I'm dead set against the use of federal subsidies. This adds to our national debt too. Our own money being used to pay a small handful of people a bunch of money to capture carbon dioxide from ethanol plants, to bury it in the ground, build a pipeline across the land of innocent farmers who don't want that built across their land. They're doing it anyway using eminent domain in the name of a global climate change cult that absolutely is a hoax, I'll say it, because it has nothing to do with the climate. Electric vehicle subsidies. Where's that coming from? It's our own taxpayer money adding to our national debt. You want to buy an electric vehicle? Fine. Don't expect me or our kids to pay for it. Yet that's the country we live in today. It's because our politics is corrupt and every politician in both parties is dancing to the tune of their donor puppet masters. This is going to take somebody who isn't captured by that system, somebody who's coming in from the outside, and I believe somebody with fresh legs to reach and lead and stand for the next generation of young Americans. I'm a father of 2 sons. We're doing this for their generation. I don't believe they're going to have the same American dream that Apurva and I had the chance to live. And I think this is our last window to get there without the kinds of changes that would otherwise spawn the kind of social unrest that I don't think our country can take when we're skating on the kind of thin ice we're skating on today. So I appreciate that question. I can see you're a mother of, is that a mother of 3? Okay. Good. Thank you for coming too. How old are you? 6. Thank you for bringing her. We're doing it for you and your generation, and I think this is our last chance to get this right, doing exactly what I laid out. Get the oil and gas out of our ground, sell it, end the foreign wars that don't advance our interest, end foreign aid to any country whose national debt per person is less than ours. We shouldn't be giving away our money when we're $34 trillion in the hole ourselves. And you know what? With that and a 75% reduction in the federal employee headcount, I'm confident that for you and you young ladies, that our best days can actually still be ahead of us. We're not done yet. If we do this right, we still might just yet be getting started. That's the way I'd like to view it. So thank you.
You promised a question to Addie.
Yeah, I'll get Addie last. You just want to check with our team. I think we have a little bit of time to get to the next spot, is what I was told before I came here. So just check with them before we're going stop to stop. We've done 330 of these events. By the Iowa caucus, we'll have done over 330. It's more than every other candidate combined. Actually, for the kids in the room, my parents had a philosophy they taught me, which was, people say good luck in this race, and my parents used to say, how do you spell luck? You spell it W-O-R-K. And so that's how I built my businesses, and we don't intend to do it any differently when we're leading this country.
Yeah, so my generation more than ever has been one that likes to erase and get rid of any history they don't like, especially with names of buildings, statues, that kind of thing all over the country. And I love history, both good, there's good and bad to
of course.
Note from. And I don't know that they should try to erase both good and bad. I think that I just want to know what your thoughts on are as far as trying to get this country away from erasing those negative sides of our history, because they are important to keep us in a mindset of to make sure they don't happen again.
Yeah, no, so actually I'm going to answer the question a little differently. Maybe I'll start it with in a personal sense. Sometimes, actually Plato and Aristotle, they say the way you understand a nation is you understand family or you understand yourself. And there's a deep interplay with our national self-reflection. If you're erasing part of your identity, just as an individual, it's like erasing part of your own past. You are the product. We are each the product of our own experiences. My views today aren't the same as what they were 20 years ago. They're informed by my experiences. And so I think part of this is less attaching the emotional judgment of shame. The conversation, I think the guy was mostly joking when he told me this, but I said, what would our founding fathers say if they were alive today? He said, well, where are all the slaves? They were alive. And he was joking around, so I don't want to give him too hard of a time. But you know what? Anybody who says that today, they would have been the slaveholder 250 years ago. And so we have to understand that we're not a perfect nation. We never have been. We never will be, and we're not today. You want to know why? Because two things are true. One is we're a nation founded on ideals. We have ideals. That's what separates us from animals, that we can believe in something bigger than ourselves. But we're also a nation comprised of human beings and not gods. How do you know you believe in God? First reminder is know that it's not you. So if those two things are true, right, we're founded on the pursuit of ideals, yet we're comprised of fallen human beings. That means that our worst hypocrisies as a nation are still our best evidence that we have ideals at all, actually. And I would rather live in a nation that has ideals and falls short of them than to live in a nation that has none at all. It's interesting how you never hear anybody calling China or Iran or anyone else a hypocrite. Why, to be a hypocrite, you had to have the ideals in the first place. Well, you know what? I'm proud to live in this nation, and it's precisely at this point in our national history when we've gotten close to what Martin Luther King even would have called the promised land. He said, we're going to make it to the promised land. I may not get there with you. Well, he didn't get there with us, but we're darn close when it comes to racial equality or gender equality, where anybody in this country can, as close as you can hope for in any country on earth in our history, achieve what you want with your own hard work and commitment and dedication. It's precisely when we're as close as we've ever been to that promised land that we then obsess over systemic racism or white guilt or misogyny or bigotry or homophobia or whatever it is. We lived in a place where you could live your life however you want as long as you're not hurting somebody else. Basically, as close as we get to that, that's when we reimagine the kinds of things that eventually we actually overcame as a country. So that'd be my message, is yes, let's embrace our history. Let's not reject the fact that we were imperfect. Let's celebrate Thomas Jefferson. I will say he's my favorite president, even though he was a slaveholder. Was he an imperfect man? Sure he was. But he was also the guy who put those ideals on a page that we still 250 years later can aspire to. And you know what funny thing about him? He invented the swivel chair while he was at it. Literally while he wrote the Declaration of Independence at the age of 33. These revolutions, these revivals, they're led by the next generation for a reason. Benjamin Franklin, he invented the Franklin stove, actually, the bifocal spectacle, a remedy to the common cold. Robert Livingston, he's a co-signer of the Declaration of Independence. While he's an ambassador to France, invents actually one of the parts of the steamship. There was something in the water back then with young people back then. They weren't erasing their history, they were embracing it. Actually, if you want, in 1776, the language of scholarship was Latin or French. You had to know multiple languages to even study your past. You didn't have it at the fingertips on the internet. Makes it a lot easier to cancel when you take it for granted. They had to actually wait 2 or 3 weeks to get the books they needed to learn about their predecessors. I think we live I come back to what I said in the beginning again. We live in a 1776 moment. And I mean that in terms of reviving the Constitution and our ideals. But I also mean that in terms of reviving our founding culture. Reviving who we are as Americans. That too is what we need to revive in this country. That inner animal spirit that has leapt oceans to lift up places like China while their culture of victimhood has held us back. What we need to do is unleash that inner animal spirit in this country again. And if there's one thing I do as our next president, I think, and I'll give you the final word, Abby, is to revive that sense of national pride in this next generation of Americans. So we'll give you the final word before we wrap up. If you'd like.
What?
On the microphone?
And ask me a question.
Sure.
I wanted to tell you that my favorite thing that you have said is when you told Chris Crispy, I'm speaking and I'm not done. I thought that was very brilliant and hilarious.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I am from Bellevue, Nebraska, and we have a great zoo, but we are missing one thing. Would you be willing to ask China for a giant set of pandas, and what do you think the chances are of getting them?
Oh. Well, I mean, that warms my heart, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. I told you at the start of this, when we opened this up, I'm going to be sitting across the table from Xi Jinping, and I can handle it. Yeah. So what I'll tell you is after we've gotten every other part of the deal that we need to get done to get China back in line, I'm going to tell them there's one more thing left on my list. And I want you to meet somebody named Abby, and she's a lot tougher than I am. And we're going to see if we can't get that done in this country. I appreciate that. The fact that your 6-year-old, 9-year-old, you're 9?
I'm
10 years old are here with us. This is what gives me my sense of purpose. My faith teaches me that God puts each of us here for a purpose. And some of you know my faith background is different than the traditional background of people who run for U.S. president. I'm Hindu. I was educated in Christian schools, and I can tell you this with confidence that we share the same value set in common. But what I can tell you is God puts each of us here for a purpose. He gives every one of us our own unique God-given gifts. You have your own, Abby, whatever they are. We have a moral duty to use those gifts to do what's right in the short time that we're given. My faith is what leads me to this journey, to this race, to do something that if you asked me a year and a half, would we be doing this? I'd have said that you were crazy. It sounds worse than a sharp poke in the eye. We're living a life my parents never imagined when they came to this country 40 years ago. But we're doing this out of our sense of duty to our kids and their generation to make sure that we don't have to be this nation in decline anymore. We don't have to be at the end of the ancient Roman Empire as we're taught to believe. I think as a nation right now, we're all actually like you. I think we're a little young, actually. I think that's what George Washington would say if he were here, that he sees a nation that is still a little young. going through our own version of our adolescence, figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense again. You go through your adolescence, you go through that identity crisis. You lose your way a little bit. You do some stupid things at times. But we are stronger for it when we get to our adulthood on the other side. So I'll tell you this, Abby, I don't think we have to be that nation in decline anymore. I think we still can be a nation in our ascent. Maybe even the early stages of our ascent, actually. Maybe we're not even at base camp. On our way still to that shining city on a hill. That country where we will look our kids in the eye and mean it when we tell them, and that you're free to speak ahead of us. Thank you for coming today, guys. God bless you and your families. And may God bless our United States of America. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Are we late to the next event? Yeah, go to the next event. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
That's the revolution we want you to be a part of. Something we can be proud of again.
I appreciate
and
being here.
that we
What's your
know
name?
we get the job done. We want you to join that
Thank
with
you.
us.
My
Please
husband
sign
had
one of
an
our
appointment.
conference
He had to
cards and let us
leave.
know
Oh, tell him thank you. I
before you head
appreciate
out
it.
today. We are looking
Thank
for
you for
some
being
folks
here, and you
to
spread the
precinct
message,
captains
okay?
We
to
sure
help
will.
support us and spread that message
Spread
on
the
conference
message.
night.
Thank you.
So again, please stay with us before you head out. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Leanne.
Leanne. It's good to see you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here.
Would you sign this for me?
Thank you.
Reagan.
Good to see you. What's your name?
Reagan.
Reagan. Oh, it's a beautiful name.
you
We
sign
brought
this?
up a great man there. That's right. Well, we'll try to revive Reagan's vision for this country. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My honor. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Hey, guys. Can you find out exactly what time? They said we had some. Guys.
Hold your women for that cup. There you go. We got to get that
thank
sign in there. Perfect.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir.
All the best. Thank you for being here. Yeah, we love that. Come on right here. Yeah, we'll do it right here.
No, I don't picture well.
Thank you. I appreciate. What's your name?
Tom Weber.
Spread the message, and we're going to do our part.
Sing for you up in Marshalltown.
That means a lot. Spread the message there too.
Right there.
I appreciate that, Tom.
Smile, honey. Oh no.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing her, and all the best to you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. Spread the message, guys. Thank you. We're going to translate that. We're going to actually make it reality for this country. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. We're not going to stop until we get the job done for this country. That's our duty. We're going to do it for this country. Thank you.
Nice kicks.
Oh, thank you. They're comfortable. I learned that. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Spread the message, guys, for this country. And
Thank you for coming.
thank you.
Double Grassley, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then some. Absolutely.
What's your big beef with Nikki Haley?
Difference in the vision of foreign policy and difference in the vision of corruption. I don't care if you're Biden or Elizabeth Warren or in our own party.
Her more than
Well, I think the corruption is unique, and that's what bothers me, actually.
because of all the.
Yeah, I basically think they're setting up to try to make it a two-horse race and eliminate Trump to have one puppet that serves their interests. That's what I think is going on in the game.
Thanks for answering.
That's what I think
that.
is happening, and I'm here to make sure that doesn't
Okay,
happen.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys. Good to see you. What's your name?
Rich.
Rich? Thank you for being here. Spread the message for our country. And
It was enlightening, man. I
Thank you.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. We'd love to have you at the caucus on the 15th. Thank you. Thanks again, Reagan. I appreciate it. Good to see you, Reagan. Thank you. What's your name?
Miranda.
Miranda. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Spread the message, and
Yeah.
we'll be grateful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, my man. What's your name?
Frank.
Frank. Thanks a lot for coming out, brother. I appreciate your question, young man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Freddie, for being here. And your generation, man.
Yes, I'll be watching.
Spread the message. Thanks. Yeah, we're going to have fun with that. Thank you, sir. We will.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Awesome, Dave. Awesome. Dave Watson. I'm sorry.
Dave, we've got your back.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, officer. Keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to let you do your job is our goal.
Thank you.
So we're going to do that. Thanks a lot. What's your name, man?
Rook.
Rook.
I shook your hand at the fair. and
Oh,
I'm
you
like,
did?
I
Good to see you
did, and
again.
all I could say was thank you. And I just felt like I just wasn't prepared. But now
Thank
what
you.
I'm going to say is I'm a really good photographer.
Okay.
And your boys
Oh my gosh, thank you.
need me.
Thank
and
you.
I'm coming to the White House to take their pictures.
You will. You
I
will.
will. I
That's
will.
that's a deal. Do it
It's
on
a
day
deal.
one.
I will.
Tell me your full name again.
Amy Doring. is
Amy
my
Doring.
name.
I won't forget it.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you again. Thank you for coming.
Good job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
It's
you.
good to see you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thanks again for coming out, guys. Take care. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Take care. All right, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Hey.